I could ask any question I wanted to.
A man has come forward stating that aliens actually showed him the image of God.
So I said, I wonder if they would let me know what God looks like.
And it gets even stranger because supposedly these aliens have lost their souls over time, and now they're trying to regain their immortality by stealing ours. His name is Erik Nanstiel, and he claims that aliens have been tampering with his DNA, taking fetuses from the women that he's been with for years, robbing him of his opportunity to have children.
I always wanted more kids. I could have had one with the woman I loved more than anything in the world, and it was taken from me. So that was poignant. That made me hate them.
Erik claims that these beings have been manipulating his DNA his entire life, and they even gave him magical powers to heal people when he was very young. It started in the spring of 1970 when he was just 16 months old. Most people don't remember memories that far back, but this event was so unique, so powerful, that he's never been able to forget it. It was early morning, just as the sun was coming up, and he was standing in his crib holding onto the guardrail. He said that he remembered that the room was still and the house was quiet. And then his attention was drawn to the closed closet door. Well, it remained closed as this white glowing mass, roughly about the size of a softball, came through it and then headed straight toward Erik, moving intelligently, deliberately, and completely silent. Eventually, it touched Erik's forehead, and then boom, everything went black. Well, several nights later, it happened again, and then sometime after that, again. As a matter of fact, it continued to happen for the next 4 years, and it always moved the same way, steadily, controlled, with a kind of quiet purpose that left no doubt it was there for Erik, specifically for him. Each time that it reached his forehead, that was it. The experience was over. Then, when Erik was 5 years old, he suffered this terrible accident, and while he was in the hospital, his hands somehow became energized and he was able to heal this dying little boy.
Welcome to Vel Arcana. Here, we share mysteries that often defy explanation. I research the cases, and my husband tells the stories.
In 1974, Erik was treated to a day at Adventureland. Well, while he was there, inside of one of these bouncy houses, he suffered this terrible accident, which resulted in a concussion and seizures. So he was taken to Lutheran General Hospital, where he spent a few days under observation. During his time there, he shared a room with this little boy named Tommy. Tommy was critically ill. He had this abscess in his abdomen that caused an infection throughout his entire body, and it gave him a fever of over 105 degrees. He was actually laying on a mattress of ice when Erik met him. He was connected to all of these critical care devices, like heart monitor, oxygen, IV lines, stuff like that. And his chances of survival were extremely thin. Well, the night before Erik was scheduled to be released, one of these orbs entered the room, and just like always, it made its way to Erik's forehead. The next day, as he was gathering his things to leave, his mother handed him a toy truck.
Mother said, Erik, give this toy to Tommy and say goodbye to Tommy. I said, Mommy, I don't want to talk to Tommy. He's going to die. And my mom said, Erik, you have to be nice to him. You have to say goodbye. It's a nice thing to do.
Erik took the truck to Tommy's bedside. The little boy was pale, exhausted, and barely breathing. And then, for some reason that Erik didn't understand, and still doesn't to this day, something inside of him said that he could heal this little boy. So he set the truck down, placed his hands on Tommy's abdomen, and then began moving them back and forth.
I remember when I was doing it, I felt self-conscious, like, oh, they're watching me. This might look weird to them. I remember being self-conscious.
Well, shortly after that, Erik and his mother left the hospital, and then they got the news about Tommy.
The abscess was gone. It was all throughout like surrounding his heart, surrounding his lungs, surrounding his inner organs. His liver, his intestines. It was just infected, and it was just gone. Like later that day, gone.
A year later, he laid those same hands on his grandfather, a man who was dying of COPD. His grandfather wasn't ready to move on just yet. There were a few things that he wanted to wrap up before he left.
And he wanted one more year of life. And I remember he was at our house. I put my hands on him, and he lived another year, like almost to the week.
Interestingly, after that, the orbs stopped coming. And when they did, seemingly they took Erik's ability to heal people with them. Well, Erik grew up, got married, got a divorce, and then built a quiet life raising his daughter Miranda. And after a while, the strange events of his childhood faded into the kind of memories that feel, well, in adulthood, more like dreams than reality. And he almost convinced himself that they were dreams. But then, in August of 1994, those entities who were behind those childhood orbs, well, they got caught in his room. It was early morning, August 20th, 1994, when Erik got his first glimpse of those entities that had been behind those orbs. He was 25 years old, and at this point, he was living in an apartment in Wheeling, Illinois with his best friend Joe. This particular morning, Joe was gone and Erik was alone. Well, just as he was waking up, something hijacked his consciousness.
I tried to open my eyes and I couldn't. I tried to move my body and I couldn't.
As Erik struggled to open his eyes, a maple leaf was suddenly injected into his mind.
It was this perfect green maple leaf with the sun above it shining down through it. And I was rotating underneath this maple leaf like this. And there was this really sickly music box music playing. It kind of like out of a horror movie. I mean, it was bizarre.
Erik said that he knew that this wasn't a dream. No, something was using this strange image and this eerie music to hold his mind in place just a few seconds longer. And that is when he heard them.
I could hear rustling on both sides of the bed, as though somebody was brushing up against the side of the bed.
Someone was in the room with Erik. Well, he fought as hard as he could, and then suddenly the spell broke.
And then I popped open my eyes, sat up straight in bed, and as fast as I could turn my head to the left, I saw them. 4 small grays, 3.5 feet tall, big ashen gray bulbous heads, big black eyes.
These small humanoid figures were exiting his room, and they were moving impossibly fast.
And they whooshed out of my room as fast as I could turn my head. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like they were propelled. Faster than anything that small could possibly run, these things were propelled out of my room, almost like they were yanked by a bungee cord. You know, they accelerated out of the room, and they went through my door like it wasn't even material, like it wasn't even solid. You know, they just phased right through the door.
Erik just sat there for a moment, completely stunned, listening to the deafening silence as he tried to get that lump in his throat to go away. Well, after a few moments, he calmed down enough to get up and look through the apartment.
I walked around the apartment. I did a little walking tour, making sure nobody was there. I went into my roommate's bedroom. He wasn't around, but, you know, room was empty. Nothing in the closets. I checked everything.
Now, I would think that at this point, many skeptics would probably think this was sleep paralysis, right? The mind does some pretty strange things at the edge of sleep. Well, if this were sleep paralysis, then 11 months later, this sleep paralysis gave Erik the answer to one of the oldest and one of the biggest questions in the universe. One night in July of 1995, Erik found himself teetering on the edge of sleep.
And I just had the thought that I could ask any question I wanted to, and the answer would come to me. So I said, I wonder if they would let me know what God looks like.
The moment that Erik formulated that question, he found himself confused over the use of the word they.
And now I'm catching myself like, they? Who they? Who am I talking to, they? Who am I referring to when I said they?
Apparently, something in his subconscious mind, the part of him that seemingly knew more than he did, had reached out instinctively towards some presence that he'd always known was there, some they that existed just beyond the edges of his awareness. Well, an instant later, a living image solidified in his mind, an enormous winged eye in blazing, vibrant magenta. Behind it, concentric rectangles radiated out from the center, like pulses of energy, each one intensifying in color as it went. The image was alive in this strange way, in a way that bypassed every category that Erik could envision for living things. And here's the creepiest part. It knew he was looking at it. He could feel its intelligence pressing up against his soul. Beyond ancient, beyond vast, utterly indifferent to the smallness of the man who was observing it. Erik sat in awe. When it was finally over, he opened his eyes, shaking. At this point in his life, Erik had no reference for this image, so he tucked it into the back of his mind and he continued on. Well, a few years later, while he was flipping through a book on Egyptian artwork, he saw this image again, and his heart nearly jumped out of his chest. There it was, the winged sun disk mounted above the doorways of ancient temples carved into stone reliefs associated with the gods Horus and Ra. So, what? Well, God, the creator of everything, was actually the god Horus from ancient Egypt? Well, he began to research, and he found that same symbol again in Mesopotamia as the Anunnaki symbol, a winged disk above kings and temples. And he kept looking, and there it was again, in Babylon. Each culture separated by centuries and geography, each one arriving at the same image to represent the same idea, an intelligence watching from above. So, were these aliens saying that they were God? Or were they saying that this symbol truly was the image of God? Well, they stayed quiet for the next 2 decades, and then, in the spring of 2020, they returned. And this time, they weren't content to simply observe. No, they wanted something from Erik, something specific, something that they intended to take, whether he was willing to give it or not. By the spring of 2020, Erik was 51 years old and he was completely submerged in a busy life. And there had been no sign of those strange visitors for the last 26 years. But that was about to change. It began with little things, like his bed being made up all wrong, or his earplugs being moved from where he usually kept them. After a while, he began to suspect that someone else was coming into his room. And that, of course, sparked that 26-year-old memory of those 4 figures whooshing out of his apartment that night. And that thought festered, and it just wouldn't leave his head. So he did a quick Google search. Before long, he was looking at a picture that perfectly matched what he had remembered from 1994. It was labeled Traditional Gray Alien. So he did something very interesting, something that I've never heard anyone else ever doing before.
He notices things are getting moved around in his room, and he does this brilliant, clever thing that he decides to put up a poster that says, I will not harm you. Please don't wipe my memory. And it's like, what, really? And so you're just assuming the aliens read English in posters and stuff, but, and that leads directly to him waking up about 2 weeks after he puts the poster up, he wakes up floating over his own garage floor.
I was levitating above the floor. My feet were off the floor, not touching the concrete.
Erik's body was tilted slightly forward. His feet were dangling, and he was completely weightless and completely paralyzed. And standing directly in front of him, no more than 6 feet away, was the traditional gray alien.
I was just agape, like I was just completely stunned. I was in a pure state of awareness. I was fully awake, but I was paralyzed. I couldn't move anything except my head. I could see my car next to me. I could see the side door of the garage. I could see the shelves of the paint cans and things like that.
And then words appeared in Erik's mind, basically saying that they weren't allowed to let him remember. Well, Erik had no more than a few seconds to process those words before he found himself sitting upright in bed, staring at the clock. It was 3:30 in the morning. Seemingly, the poster had worked, and this little gray alien had broken the rules, right? In any case, Erik sat in shock. They were real. The figures from 1994 were real. And to Erik, that also meant that the childhood orbs were real too. All of it. Every strange and inexplicable fragment of his life that he had spent decades quietly doubting was real. Well, 1 week later, they came again.
I woke up in the middle of the night and there was light in my face and a face in my face. He was right here.
The face of a gray alien was less than 10 inches away from Erik. The moment was intense, and Erik was terrified to look into its eyes. But after a moment, he did. During this encounter, Erik learned that these beings were from Zeta Reticuli, and they intended to continue visiting Erik, which they did every few weeks. Some nights, Erik woke up and he caught glimpses. Dark, powerful eyes staring into his. Long, spindly fingers dancing around the edges of his face. Body parts being manipulated by this alien presence. But he was never conscious long enough to really make any sense of it. That is, until one night when he woke up and he found these alien beings had completely removed his arm. It was July 15th, 2022, and Erik had went to bed right around 11 o'clock. He fell asleep fast, but then the pain came. Searing, white-hot pain in his left arm. Well, he opened his eyes, and he found out that he was no longer in his bed. No, he was with them. He turned his head, and he looked at his arm, and as I stated in the last segment, it was completely gone. Severed from just below the elbow. A moment later, he saw it. It was lying on a small silver table next to his bed.
How would you like to go to bed wearing your pajamas one night and you wake up and you're naked and you're on a metal table and you look over and there's your arm sitting in a tray?
As terror was running rampant in his mind, someone approached from his right, and then everything went black. And just a moment later, he woke up at home and his arm was completely intact. Well, from here on, these visits continued, and somewhere in the years of removing and replacing body parts, extracting semen, and God only knows what else, a question began to formulate in Erik's mind. Why in the world would a superior race of beings be doing this to us? Well, that question festered, and over the next few years, piece by piece, Erik stitched together an answer that had nothing to do with biology, but everything to do with the soul. Now, here's where things really get interesting. In 2020, Erik had this relationship with a woman named Samantha. Later on, she got pregnant and then lost the baby. The strange thing was, the doctor said that she had indeed been pregnant, but he couldn't find the fetus. Well, in September of 2022, everything came to a head. Erik woke up, standing in an alien environment with two tall grays. One directed him toward a wall, which came to life with images of dozens of human faces of varying ages. Toddlers, children, teenagers, and even full-grown adults. As Erik watched, he was told that these were half-human, half-alien crossbreeds, and all of the ones on the screen were his children. Then, on another occasion, he was shown a single baby about 6 months old, and he was told that this one too was one of his children. Later on, when he did the math, it worked out that this baby was the same age that Samantha's baby would have been had she not lost it.
And Samantha's and mine's child was going to be born 6 or 7 months ago. I'm like, oh shit. No. So they took him when he was a preemie, artificially gestated him. If this is the same child, how would I know? But the timing is too perfect. So I got emotional. I always wanted more kids. I could have had one with the woman I loved more than anything in the world, and it was taken from me. So that was poignant. That made me hate them.
After all of this, Erik was taken one more time, and during that session, he was told that the alien-human crossbreeds were kept here on Earth, underground.
Suddenly I was looking at a monochromatic, just a gray map of the contiguous 48 United States, and they had the state division lines. And they zoomed in on Illinois, and there were 3 caverns underground in eastern Illinois running parallel with the Indiana border.
There are caverns in Illinois, but not exactly in that area. However, as I share this mystery with you, Erik claims that there are countless half-breeds living there now. And to be fair, there are geological formations very deep beneath that area that could contain caverns. But as of yet, we lack the technology to accurately scan that far down. So, why are they doing all of this, right? What's the point? Well, Erik believes that the Greys originated on a planet orbiting Zeta Reticuli. That's a star system about 39 light years from Earth. Over time, their planet lost its magnetic field, and then solar radiation degraded their biology. Sexual reproduction became impossible, so they turned to cloning, engineering and re-engineering themselves across the millennia to survive. But in doing so, they journeyed beyond a threshold that they could never come back from. They became, in Erik's words, biological machines, intelligent, functional, but utterly without the one thing that it means to be alive, a soul. Erik's theory rests on the premise that cuts right across spirituality and physics. Souls, he believes, require an electromagnetic environment to exist in between incarnations, a way station, if you will, one that is held in place by the living magnetic field of a planet. When we die, the electrical activity of our nervous system fades, and our consciousness, our souls, migrate into this field and is held there until it can return. The Earth's magnetic field, in this view, is not just a geological phenomenon. No, it's alive with consciousness. At any given time, it holds a hive of souls that are in transit between lives. When the Greys' planet lost its magnetic field, their souls had nowhere to go. So each time one of them dies, well, that's it. No returning, no recycling, just silence. And now, Erik hypothesizes that these aliens are trying to claw their way back into that cycle using humans as a stepping stone by merging their genetics with ours, by creating hybrids that carry just enough human biology to host a soul, children who are half something ancient and soulless and half something else that has never, in all of human history, lost its connection to eternity. Interesting thoughts, for sure, right? But nearly all of this can be explained away with sleep paralysis, which is one of the most well-documented yet poorly understood phenomenon in human neuroscience. It affects an estimated 8% of the general population, and up to 30% of the people who experience it? Now, check this out. Report vivid, terrifying accounts, intruders in the room, creatures on the chest, and the sensation of being held down, or of floating. Erik's encounters followed the sleep paralysis playbook with undeniable and painful precision. They occur in the early morning hours between 3 and 6 a.m. That's peak REM territory. They begin with him not being able to move. They involve figures at his bedside, and they end with a snap back to waking consciousness. And let's not forget that Erik is a man who has spent decades consuming UFO literature, and his soul theory, while philosophically eloquent, is impossible to verify. It's an interesting idea, absolutely, but interesting ideas are not evidence. And the geological formations beneath Illinois that might allow for caverns, well, they're not a secret. No, they're well documented and available to the public. And here's where the skeptic's pencil sharpens even more. Author and UFO enthusiast Nigel Kerner, he published this book called The Song of the Greys in 1997. In it, he argues that the Greys are not a natural species, but rather an artificial one, created through such extreme self-modification that they've severed their connection to their soul entirely. That their reliance on cloning, their hive mind telepathy, their lack of individual identity, all of that points to beings who have become, well, in the most profound sense of the word, empty. And that hybridization is not about biology at all. No, it's about reclaiming eternity. Sound familiar? Erik began consuming UFO literature in the mid-1990s, and he says that he discovered Kerner's book only after formulating his own conclusions. But if Erik were making this up, well, wouldn't that be exactly what he would say? Now, to be fair to Erik, he isn't just some anonymous voice on the internet. No, he is a well-documented, thoroughly investigated, and publicly vetted experiencer whose case has been taken seriously by some of the most credible names in UFO research. His abduction case was thoroughly investigated by MUFON, and he was found to be so credible that it was presented at their 2025 symposium as the single best case of that year, selected above 8,000 others. 8,000. His story was also featured on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens. And Amy interviewed Erik personally. She spoke to him for hours, and she says that he comes across extremely genuine. Perhaps the Greys in Erik's life were just creations from sleep paralysis, demons brought about in the recesses of a man's mind who just read way too much on UFOs. Or perhaps somewhere beneath the tons of earth in eastern Illinois, in caverns too deep to find and way too vast to imagine, there really are children, half human, half alien, and 100% the saviors of a civilization that's been dead for millennia, brought to life by aliens who aren't here because they want to study us, manipulate us, or destroy us. No, they're here crying out for help because they watch their own eternity go dark. And somewhere in the long recursive mystery of what we are and why we're here, they recognized in us the one thing that all of their technology, all their genetic mastery could never manufacture: the soul. And all they really want is to come home. Hey everybody, do you guys see anything different? She's gorgeous, right?
Yeah, we just had a baby, and her name is...
Yeah, we still haven't named her yet. We picked her up yesterday. This is all still pretty new to us.
Right, but we thought maybe you could help us out.
Absolutely, and she told me in private that she wants to be the mascot for the channel. She's definitely a Velarcana family member. See?
So she's definitely going to need a name that reflects power, protection, ancient hidden knowledge, something like that.
So please leave us your ideas in the comments below. You can help us name the new family member.
You know, I'm also going to set up a couple special memberships on our Buy Me a Coffee.
You guys can officially be on our Dogders team. See what I did there? Dogder?
Oh my gosh. Well, sometimes when Damon's telling stories, you know, B-roll is really hard to find. Maybe she'll make her way up onto the big screen.
And of course, we know that Amy is gonna definitely go over to Fourth Wall and design shirts and coffee mugs with this beautiful face on it, our mascot. So go on over to Fourth Wall and check it out.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.